Okay, welcome. Thank you for joining us today for this Period Action Day 2021 session on what is period poverty. My name is Shruti Gautam, and I'm on the Youth Advisory Council for Period, and I'll be your host for today as we discuss this topic. Today, we will be having an engaging discussion with three panelists who have lots of passion and experience in this topic. And we'll start by having each panelist introduce themselves and talk about more why they care about the issue of period poverty itself. So Jennifer, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thank you so much for having me. My name is Jennifer Gaines. I am the program director at Alliance for Period Supplies. We support a national network of all individually operated nonprofit organizations across the country that help to address period poverty in their communities. And I'm so excited to be here today to talk to you about that. It is an issue that is really close to my heart. I've done, reproductive health and sexual health education for almost 10 years. And having this conversation on national level is so super important to this issue. And so I'm so glad that we're highlighting it today. So thank you again for having me.
Thank you. Lena, do you want to introduce yourself next? If that's how you pronounce your name too, sorry.
Yeah, it's Lena. Well, hello everyone. I'm Lena Van. I'm the founder and executive director of the Black Period Project. We are a youth-led, student-led nonprofit organization that is fighting against period poverty and fighting for menstrual equity for Black communities in the Southeast United States. And we're super, super excited to be here. I'm so glad to have this conversation and be able to represent my community in this space.
Thank you. And then Anya, do you want to end this off there?
Yeah. So hi, everyone. My name is Anya Patel. I am an 11th grader at Hillsborough High School, and I'm a youth advocate working towards ending period poverty. Last year, I started my own nonprofit called Global Girls Initiative, and it focuses on providing menstrual hygiene products and education to students and youth in underserved communities. Last year, I donated 50,000 menstrual hygiene products to all the Title I middle and high schools within Tampa Bay area during the pandemic. And this year, I am focusing on providing menstrual hygiene dispensers inside of the Title I schools. And I am so glad that I am able to speak with all of these people here and just celebrate National Period Day today.
And thank you guys again for all of your introductions. It's really impressive to hear about what everybody's done and what angle they're coming from too. I think we have a lot of different perspectives here on the topic of period poverty itself. The Period organization just recently did their State of the Period 2021 study again, and they themselves saw that nearly 25% of US students have struggled to afford period products at some point, menstruating students. And so when we have those types of statistics at hand, these are very important issues to discuss and consider as well. But we should just look at the actual background of period poverty and where we're coming from, because without understanding what the issue is, it's hard to even understand where to start or combat it. So I just kind of wanted to ask in general, what does period poverty look like, or how does it manifest in communities that you care about?
Well,
For anyone, yeah.
I can start us off there. So whenever the topic of period poverty comes up, I really like to emphasize not just affordability, but accessibility. So we are headquartered in Greensboro, North Carolina, which is one of the top food deserts in the entire country. So while many communities, Black and Brown communities, have to drive 15, 20 minutes away to be able to have, fresh produce, these are same people who are also having to drive 15, 20 minutes away to be able to get pads and tampons. So from a youth perspective, we have people who are students who may not have cars, who may not have access to public transportation, who are not able to assess these items. And then just from a Southeast standpoint, we're in the Bible Belt. And with that comes a lot of stigma, especially within the Black community, because specifically for Black women, a lot of our identity is rooted in the cleanliness of our appearance. And that comes from internalized racism. And due to that, we don't perceive period blood as being clean. So there's a lot of stigma and taboo around periods. And that also impacts what period poverty looks like for us.
Thank you so much for that, Lena. And I can jump into and say, period poverty is just the inability to afford period products in order to manage a cycle. And so folks in this country just who are experiencing period poverty just do not have the money to purchase period supplies, proper period supplies. And we take the angle of poverty in general, right? So period products are a basic necessity, just like food, just like water. And so there are many families in this country right now that are choosing between purchasing period products or purchasing other basic necessities to help support their families. And so when they don't have that money to afford these products, they tend to, subsidize or substitute products like using, socks, tissue paper that can affect, their health. It also just affects everything down the line between, mental health, physical health, feeling shamed and embarrassed. And so, we come at this at very different angles across the country, but more or less it's just the inability, not having the money to afford these products.
Yeah, so just like Miss Lena and Jennifer were saying, period poverty is not being able to access period products, but I think it goes a lot deeper than that, because just like how Jennifer was saying, it does take a toll on your mental health, and it hurts your confidence, your dignity, and it makes you feel vulnerable and shameful, because similar to what Lena was saying, in Indian culture, there's a big taboo surrounding periods and how periods are considered dirty and unholy.
Yeah, so a lot of what you guys also mentioned was period stigma and just the ideology associated with periods too, which can be a fueling cause for period poverty, as it's a topic people don't want to discuss. And I mean, it's why we're here too and are trying to discuss these types of topics. But it's really important, in my opinion, maybe in yours as well, when you're advocating for something, to understand what you're advocating towards, which is why I also want to ask, what's the opposite of period poverty? What is actual menstrual health? So if any of you would like to take that first.
I think the opposite of that would be having free period products in schools and public spaces for menstruators to access. It also means to have age appropriate and medically accurate reproductive and sexual health education in schools. And so that needs to start at a really early age. And so when you start introducing what happens to your body and normalizing that, we start to create this different culture, because we're accustomed to being ashamed of having a period. And so when you don't include everybody in the conversation, right? So when we're going into schools and we're talking about what happens to your body, everybody, males, females, everybody needs to be included into that conversation. And so to me, that's what the opposite of period poverty looks like, is making sure that everybody's in the conversation. We normalize it from a very young age. And these products are available for free at schools so that students can go to school and not have to worry about not having the proper supplies to manage their periods.
I was gonna say, Anya, if you wanted to go. I just have very little thing I want to add in terms of period poverty, because it is a public health issue. I think the main opposite source of that would be like being able to afford and have access to healthcare. So like Jennifer said, being able to have these dispensers in schools to be able to have access to that, as well as in terms of menstrual health. I always think of it so much more than just periods. It's anything related to menstruation. So reproduction and sexual health as well. Something that we really try to emphasize in Black Period Project is making sure that we have discussions around gender identity and consent as well, because not every person who has a period is a woman, and not every woman has a period.
Yeah, so what I was going to say is something super similar to what both of them said. And yeah, I think that the opposite of period poverty would definitely be everyone having access to menstrual hygiene products. But I really do agree with all of them on how important menstrual hygiene education is. Because one issue is not having the product, but another issue is not understanding your body and understanding what is going on. And that can lead to a bunch of lack of confidence and lack of self-esteem, just not understanding your body. So I think education is a really big thing, because I remember when I was in 6th grade, I think period was mentioned maybe like once or twice in like a sentence when they're going over sex ed, but no one really taught us in depth about what a period is and how to deal with it.
And I really like different perspectives that are coming towards this too for what menstrual health looks like. One person on the Youth Advisory Council with me, I remember in an earlier panel, was talking about how we link the opposite of period poverty a lot to consumer products, that we think of it as like, oh, let's get rid of the tampon tax, or oh, let's make these products free, and think of it more underneath the frameworks of honestly like a capitalistic framework of how we view periods and period poverty. But one thing I think is interesting, how we bring up the idea of how period stigma exists, and that should also be a part of what is the opposite of period poverty. The period stigma should go away. And I think that like behavioral aspect is something that you all mentioned, especially Anya near the end. And it's something that we should stay true to. I also wanted to ask in kind of a broad way, who does period poverty actually affect, and why is it an issue? And looking at it from two ways to see, is the menstruating community actually what we all think of it to be, and does it affect more people than we just assume? So if anybody wants to take that first.
And I can go first. So in terms of who does it affect, whenever you think about periods or you think about pads and tampons, I always think about media and think about commercials. And who do we see in these commercials? Who do we see who is able to, you know, run around and jump and dance? Because you guys know how tampon commercials are. And these are people who are represented in media. And I think that's actually true as to who we think like, oh, this is who is being affected by periods, because these are the people that are talking about periods. When in reality, a lot of people who are affected by period poverty disproportionately is marginalized communities. It's people who are affected by any other issue that you see in this country. Is the people that are going to be affected by period poverty. So whether that's Black and brown communities, whether that's the LGBTQ plus community, like all of these communities are still being affected by period poverty. It's just like with anything else, you won't see these faces.
Absolutely. And I do want to jump in, Lena, because I think that's a really important piece, is that representation, right? And looking at those commercials and seeing somebody that doesn't always look like you. And so I think that the people that, you know, are most affected by period poverty are folks who are lower income, students that live under poverty level, you know, menstruators that are incarcerated, the indigenous communities that live either at or below poverty levels are very much affected by this. Homeless folks who don't have, you know, how homes or shelter. I also like to bring in the point of single mothers that are supporting their families and have to make really, really tough decisions at the end of the day, are really suffering. They were already suffering before the pandemic, and they're suffering even more now.
I have to agree with both of them about how all of these different communities are being affected, and especially how lower socioeconomic areas and the families that live there are especially affected, because they need to choose between food and period products, and they're obviously going to need to choose food because period comes at a secondary level, I guess you would call it. But also, I know this one statistic. I believe that it changed from 1 in 5 to 1 in 4. But 1 in 4 girls miss school due to a lack of access to period products in the US. So before I heard the statistic, whenever I heard of the word period poverty, I only thought it affected girls and menstruators in third world countries. But the truth is, it happens here in the US, a first world developed country. And it's happening within our country, our state, and even our community. And the people who are being affected by it, they don't have to seem like they're struggling with it. They can be struggling with it inside, and you'd never be able to know. So just always be aware of the fact that they could be right next to you.
And I want to come back to this idea too that I think everybody talked about, is just it's more than what we think about who is affected by period poverty, and especially how Anya brought up the statistics. But even if we look at period poverty as an idea of like um, the behaviors associated with it, I mean, we don't have enough teaching with it, and that affects so many students. And just spread across all income levels, it doesn't even matter. Like if you go to a school and you get your period and you're unprepared, you're already at a hindrance. It's something that's just affected as a whole on people who are menstruating. And some communities get affected more just because they unfortunately lie under some categories that we mark as um, just marginalized groups. And like straying away from words like developed or developing too, just looking in whole, like it's a problem that a lot of people in the world face, which is why I also wanted to ask, how does an intersectional issue and how does it tie into other issues we have in the world as well? So whoever wants to pick that up first.
Intersectionalism is kind of my thing. Oh, go ahead, Jennifer, if you want to go ahead. Okay. Yeah, intersectionalism is like kind of my thing in terms of this space. And just intersectionalism, the very basic way to explain that is, where do my identities meet at and where do I fit into these intersections? So when I think about it as an intersectional issue, I always break it down into how is me being in these intersections affected by inequality and inequity in the country and in the world. And then when we break down like what are the sources of inequity, we have capitalism, we have the heterosexual patriarchy, and we have the white supremacy. So if I do not fall into any of these categories that produce inequity and inequality in the country and in the world, then I'm likely going to fall underneath these intersectional identities. And when you're a menstruator and you're one of the menstruators who are affected by period poverty, as Jennifer listed quite a few of like who falls under period poverty, you'll see like these are a lot of identities that are intersectional. So Black and a woman, gay and a menstruator, a single mother who's also a menstruator, like all of these are multiple identities that we all hold. And because we all hold these identities, we're all affected by period poverty.
I think that was a wonderful definition, and I don't even want to touch it. I think that was perfect.
Yeah, I think Lena described it absolutely perfectly about how period poverty affects so many different people of so many different identities.
And for the people who are listening into, I think sometimes when we look at the issues of period poverty, our minds instinctively go to the scenarios that we've talked about as well, like if a student comes into school and doesn't have a period product, or if you just aren't able to afford it when you go to a store as well. But when we link that into other identities, for example, if you're trans and you are in another bathroom that may not have access, so even if your school district provides for girls' bathrooms, you're still at an inaccessibility. Or if you are underneath, for example, if you are homeless and you have that other barrier in your face, a lot of homeless shelters won't provide period products. Or, for example, people who are imprisoned. Some prison systems have you pay for period products. And it's incredible how many different things can compound and make it a bigger challenge for a bodily process. But like others says too, like Lena's definition here is perfect on what we actually see as intersectionality for period poverty. And it's why I also kind of wanted to ask, like, we have all these negative things that we've been discussing right now. It sounds like it's so hopeless, but there's still so many people, those who are in this Zoom and outside, who work every day to combat this issue. So what's the solution? What can we possibly do in to combat these types of issues, and how can we live in a world where people are thriving with their own menstrual health? Whoever wants to take that.
So I wanted to start off with a big solution is obviously donating to any organizations that need period products, any homeless shelters, any prisons, just any place always can need period products. So just don't be afraid to donate them. But I think a really big one is advocacy and being able to spread the message of period poverty. but also being able to contact your Congress people and your House of Representatives and all of those people, because they love to hear from their constituents and they don't know too much about what the problems are. So if you call them or email them and tell them, hey, period poverty is a huge issue, it's affecting so many people around me, try to convince them to put pads inside of bathrooms and try to make them free in your state. I know that a lot of states already have it, not too many, but a few. I know Illinois, New York, and California already have them. So I think implementing them in a lot of states would definitely help with this issue.
Yeah, I think that's super important. First of all, to just raise awareness. So continue to have conversations like this, continue to have initiatives and campaigns like Period Action Day, so that we can highlight some of the issues that are going on. Also, tagging along with what Anya said is, raising awareness amongst legislators, because we know in our country, the majority of the people who can make decisions don't look like us. They don't experience the same things that we do. And so this issue really isn't connected with them as much. But if you reach out to them, you raise awareness, you educate them, and you knock on that door and you don't let them say no, and you have that conversation with them, this opens up more doors for us to be able to pass more period legislation across the country. Because again, it's really, really important to get the folks who can make those decisions. But how do we get there is by having these conversations and normalizing this as an issue that we're not going to back down on.
Jennifer brought up a really great point. I was going to say education. Education is one of the most important ways to combat this issue. For me, as a freshman in college, I didn't realize that I was experiencing period poverty. As someone who was like, oh, well, just because I don't have a car, so I can't go to Walmart and get pads and stuff. That's not period poverty. Like, that's not what that looks like, but that is what that looks like. And that it looks different on different levels. So being able to explain, yes, you may be going through this thing and you don't even understand that that's what's happening. It becomes a lot more real, and like Jennifer said, being able to connect with something when you're able to put a name to it and understand this is how it's impacting you. So in the very, very, very simple way, just on an individual basis in your community, is just talking to people and educating yourself and sharing these experiences. So that way, people know, this is not something that just is a one-off thing that only happens to me, something that we can dismiss. It is an issue, it is a public health issue, and we should be aware of that.
Yeah, I mean, all of that. And I think for anyone who's listening in, yes, charity is a great place to start, but it's always a place to start. That shouldn't be the end goal. You don't want it to continue on as just being an act of charity. Policy is a sustainable change, and any sort of advocacy or talking is one way to get there. And that's why I think everybody who is in this Zoom cares so much about this issue as well, because they want for change to seem to be happen. And so anyone who's being part of this discussion or is just starting out shouldn't feel like they're limited in any way or think that, oh, I don't really know that much about this issue, I don't know where to start. Just talking with people and talking with groups, someone always needs help with it. And definitely, as Anya brought up as well, just Congress people in general, and Jennifer too, they don't look like us. And even if they do, they might construe the word, the phrase of period poverty to be limited to a very specific amount of population. But like Lena said as well, it's something that can associate with so many people. And you may not even understand that it's something you're afflicted with, but a lot of girls who just might, not girls, sorry, just a lot of people who are menstruating and they go to school, or a lot of people who can't afford period products maybe once in a while may not associate themselves with the term, but it is something that they can experience. And just solutions around that is something that anybody can be involved with. That's all the questions we have today for the panel. And so in the end, I just kind of wanted to mention just our call to action here for today. So how can people continue to address this issue in their own community? And unless any of the panelists want to add in another thing for a call to action here, for a Period Action Day specifically, we're looking at preparing for further measures, advocating for what you believe in, and also donating your time and money as our center call of actions. But do any of the panelists have anything else that they would like to mention for anyone who can be watching? How can they get involved?
Yeah, so I can start. I mean, for us, we have a national network of over 130 nonprofit organizations to help support. So I would say go to our website, allianceforperiodSupplies.org, check out the list of our allied partners and see how you can help. Also, just on a community level, just reach out and see local organizations that you can donate there. You can do a product drive and donate products to that local organization is really a great start. And that just makes you aware of what people may be, suffering in your community.
So I will add on to that and just say, start by just having the conversation, because periods, they're not gross, they're not weird, they're just a natural process that happens to those who have uteruses, and that's nothing that we should feel embarrassed or ashamed about. And the more that we as a community start to have these conversations and normalize these discussions around periods, and I feel like that's the sooner we can start erasing the stigma and raising awareness for period poverty, and most importantly, just creating a safe space for menstruators to feel comfortable and empowered about their bodies. And then just in terms of Black Period Project, we're always looking for people to donate items, funds, times, and resources. So if you're interested, of course, check out our website, blackperiodproject.org. Reach out to us on Instagram. We don't have a Twitter yet, but I hope we'll have one soon. Just any ways that you can find to contact us, we are there to support our marginalized communities.
Yeah, just exactly what Lena said about the least you could do is just by opening up about periods, talking normally about them, because they're not some dirty topic. They're natural. Periods are natural, and you should be able to talk about them freely. As for Global Girls Initiative, if you would love to donate or even do something about education, please reach out to us at global.gi on Instagram.
Okay, so I unfortunately think that's the end of our discussion here today. But it was really nice hearing from everybody here about their organizations, but also their own thoughts and observations on the topic of period poverty. For anybody tuning in, hopefully this has been helpful for understanding more about the background of the issues. But yeah, thank you to all the panelists for joining in today.